Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to International Flavor. My older brother is on vacation, hopefully going to have a wonderful birthday with him and his lovely wife. And he has probably made one of the most epic mistakes of his life by leaving me in charge here tonight. Let's see. Let's see if time bears that out as a fact or not. Um, Hopefully you're all having a good day and being able to enjoy life. And hopefully tonight we will give you some good information. And we're going to do something a little bit different tonight. Um, Obviously, because Sam's gone, and before we had some things laid out, but tonight I thought we'd do a little bit different format. So let's start with what's happening right now in the news. And real quick, I wanted just to give you a brief overview of what we've done so far. So if you haven't caught um, I would say 7 episodes where I've been invited on the show, we start off with the American world order over time and talking about the United States becoming the preeminent power in Western society post World War II. And then we went into the Bush family. We followed them from just before World War II and all of their dealings recently to show what type of power and influence they've had as a family. In episode 3, we talked about various conspiracies that turned out to be fact, and we emphasized the importance of understanding what's going on around us, recognizing truth, and then acting accordingly. In episode 4, we talked about globalism and what is globalism and why it's important. Episode 5, we talked about what things we pivoted to and from because of 9/11. We also lightly touched on some of the things that folks point to as potential conspiracies with 9/11. Didn't really get into depth about that. We can possibly do that on a future show. In episode 6, we talked about social breakdown and basically said that the people you have to worry about are your neighbors, not the globalists. You need to be good to your neighbors was the theme there, and they need to be good to you. We need to all live together in respect and harmony. And I think that ties in well with our opening news stories tonight about some of the things we've seen recently, but we'll get into that. And then the last episode we did, episode 7, was on global power structures and how things really work in the world. We tend to see things from a very American-centric viewpoint here in the United States. And a lot of Americans don't travel globally, and they certainly don't understand global politics. So we talked a little bit about those things. And tonight, I hope to bring some more of that picture together about all of the things we've talked about and why it's important. But let's start with what's happening right now. It's it's easy to get swept up in the headlines, the emotion, the noise, and I said it before and I'll say it again that if you can watch the news for 15 minutes without getting emotionally stirred in some type of righteous indignation against the Republicans or the Democrats or the evildoers, if you can do that, you deserve a medal. I try to avoid the media for that purpose because that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to get us. I don't call it the 24-hour news cycle. It's like the 24-hour indignation cycle. Um, so here we're not going to get swept up in the emotion or the noise, but here we are going to pause, unpack, and understand. So story number 1 tonight is a little bit about what was going on recently over the weekend. The No Kings rallies. And the real question is this something organic? Is this something Americans feel strongly about as we have, potentially seen out there, lots of people gathering? Or is this something that has been manufactured? So this weekend, protests erupted in over 1,800 cities across America. And the movement behind it calls itself No Kings. Sounds patriotic on the surface, right? So let's ask, who's behind the movement? Um, and I think it's important anytime you go out for a cause and you are chanting in the streets and you've got your pitchforks ready to go, uh, don't you really want to know, like, really who got you there, why you're there, if there are any ulterior motives? Personally, I think it's great. We definitely don't want uh, we don't want kings in America, not at all. Um, it's not what I've seen over the course of my lifetime, but we definitely don't want them. Let's talk about, first of all, how this came to be. You may remember that a certain Christy Walton from the Walmart family, a very famous Walmart family, paid for a full-page New York Times ad calling for mass mobilization. Nothing to see here, folks. You were told in a newspaper and on social media about No Kings. You were given marketing material and you responded, right? Or was this something you really felt inside? Uh, so she took out the full page ad. She called for mass mobilization. It was the second time she's done it this year. The first time, not much happened. Um, and the message is that Donald Trump is acting like a king, a dictator. So, as is usual, as is my typical self, I like to go against whichever party happens to be mobilizing its forces. And I like to call out the hypocrisies and weaknesses. So I made a social media post that went something like this. It was one short year ago that the Democrat Party elite picked their candidate without the vote of the people. You remember Kamala, right? Yeah, they picked her. But this was after they set up the sitting president with an early debate to expose his mental weaknesses that they themselves had been covering up for years. And after they had politely told him, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Poor guy, getting outed by his own party. Not just his own party, it was our only Barack Obama and Hillary Rodham Clinton and Nancy Pelosi that gathered together, and with a few Hollywood stars, put pressure on King Biden to step down. And if that wasn't enough, the auto pen took care of the rest. Anyway, I digress. So this was after they had already been secretly running the government. Who was running the government? Well, the folks I mentioned. And they've been on TV saying as much. But is that the latest, or was that just kind of an emergency? No. We have to go back to the 2023 Democrat primaries, which they manipulated to ensure that populist candidates like RFK would not be included. This was after they lied to the American public in 2020. Remember, they knew Biden had dementia. They knew that he had problems, other health problems, as has come to light, and they lied about it. If they had said anything and been honest, then we would never have voted for him. It was already very close, even with all that. But what else did they do in the 2020 Democrat primaries? Remember our friend Bernie Sanders, who won the first three primaries? Iowa, New Hampshire, one of the Carolinas. Um, Barack Obama himself, along with an elite steering committee comprising of the Clintons as well, orchestrated the immediate dropout of all the other candidates except for Biden and Bernie Sanders. Thus, and they kept Biden in the basement, and they had his talk very scripted, and they tried to make Bernie Sanders look like a loon, which sometimes is easy to do. In any case, he lost after winning 3 primaries. So that's what they did to the populist candidate. Are there any kings here? Now, it's interesting because some people argue, well, the DNC and the RNC are private organizations. But yeah, are they telling you up front that they're manipulating? Are they telling it to you? Are they publicizing it? No, they're leading you to believe that you have a vote, that you have a choice, when in fact, they are the ones making the choices, and you have a supposed choice between two parties. So anyway, I ended my post by saying, hey, protest against kings. Start with the Democrat Party. I am all about no kings. Are you? And then I posted a picture of Barack Hussein Obama wearing a crown and a nice robe, which was put together very nicely by our friend Grok 3 AI. Um, so he looks, Obama looks sharp with his crown and everything. I'm sure he admires that picture. I'm gonna actually try to get him to sign it. Um, so let's consider this, right? I'm kind of ripping on this whole thing and making fun of the Democrat Party, but let's consider this with a little bit of clarity. President Trump, like Clinton, Bush, and Obama, is using legal authority to enforce U.S. immigration laws. Is that tyranny? So remember, these protests are to stop him from becoming king. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. However, what was it that precipitated this? The enforcement of laws. Not bypassing the laws, the enforcement of the laws. There's a sound clip I would love to play. I don't know enough about this system to do it, but where we have the mayor of Los Angeles basically saying, in essence, if he would just stop enforcing the immigration policies, then we wouldn't have riots like this. Oh, so if we just stop enforcing the law, well, we wouldn't have all of these problems that we have. But where did the problem come from? I forget. Oh, wait a minute. Somebody left the border open. Somebody left the border open. We're going to get to that. Because I have yet to find a Democrat friend of mine that can articulate at all why the borders were left open. When I asked the question, was it a policy that was there to help America? Did we need these people? Was there something? None of us voted on that. None of us voted on it. But yet we've got, by some accounts, 20 million people that were let into the country, rapists, murderers, everything else, and we're led to believe that removing them is actually the tyrannical act. Let me ask you this. Why was Trump calling out the National Guard, which he had the authority to do? There's no doubt about it. He has the authority to do that. Why was he doing that? Because governors and local police forces were not enforcing the law. They were letting these rioters just run all over and do whatever they wanted. Let's take a look back. Do you remember Gavin Newsom sending out armed police officers to arrest parents who didn't have masks for their children during the pandemic? Do you remember that? We can afford to send out a couple of different squad cars to a single home because they are not masking up, but we can't send any squad cars to rioters and looters in LA. who is trampling what rights. And I would call upon all of you that really supported this Democrat action to take a look at this. Because, yes, it was paid for by oligarch billionaires, which also the Democrat Party claims to hate. But was it for a good cause? Was it for the right cause? I can't find any evidence of Trump doing anything that was king-like, except for enforcing the law. So the narrative that's out there, right, is something that we've got to be mindful of. We've got to be mindful of that. All right. So tyranny is not defined by who enforces the law. It's defined by who breaks it. Just a refresher there. All right, so let's look at recent presidential actions that were not voted on. We've got the border opening policies. Remember, Biden canceled Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. He halted border wall construction. He did mass parole of migrants under the quote unquote humanitarian exemptions. And his result was record high border crossings, cities overwhelmed, money being moved from one place to another that local legislatures had voted on. What else did he do? Student loan forgiveness attempt, right? That was executive action, later challenged and partially struck down. What about the COVID-19 mandates? He attempted to have OSHA vaccine mandates for private businesses, which was blocked by the Supreme Court. What about climate executive orders? Well, he re-entered the Paris Climate Accord without Senate ratification. Without Senate ratification. And he did mass funding towards green energy. And we also know that he spent money rather crazily in USAID, right? Funding programs which none of us voted for. Does that qualify as something that should be protested against under the No Kings banner? I would say yes. I would say yes. We see the same thing with Barack Obama. He did DACA, which is deferred action for childhood arrivals. Remember, he was implementing this via executive action after Congress refused to pass the DREAM Act. Well, they didn't pass my act. I'm just going to make something else. What about the Libya bombing in 2011? This was military action without congressional approval. So he bypassed the War Powers Act. Is that kingly? What about the Fast and Furious gun running? This was the controversial ATF operation. And this was later denied by what? Executive privilege. He hid it by executive privilege. Nothing kingly here, right, folks? So, again, you have to take the time to look at what you believe in and why, what you stand for and why. We saw the same thing with George W. Bush, Patriot Act and NSA surveillance, right? A lot of the claims of the Iraq War, all lies. If he had told us the truth, we never would have gone in there. So that is a lot to take in, I know. And if you're one of those people that's been slurping up the Kool-Aid of this latest oligarch / Democrat Party manipulation, take some time. Hopefully this acts as a little bit of antidote for that poison. Alrighty. Second news story of the day was this assassination in Minnesota of a couple of former political leaders. There's a lot that's being said out there about it. I'm going to ask, how does a person reach a point where they target people? Right? And this a lot of folks are saying this was a Republican that targeted Democrats. Some people are denying that and saying, no, it was a Democrat and, and Republicans clothing or whatever. You can look at other channels for that kind of stuff. My question is, what does it take to get you to go kill somebody of a political party? We've already seen people try to kill Trump. So what conditions lead to that kind of hatred? And what kind of moral collapse? Like where's the framework that normally keeps you from doing something like that? Now this reminds me of Lebanon. So I've been to Lebanon several times, and Lebanon is a devastated, trashed country. Um, and it literally just eats itself alive. The politicians are all corrupt. Um, it's a sad place, and whenever you're there, you're just like, man, this place has so much potential. If only they weren't overcome by all of the nonsense of these two major political groups. What? Wait a minute. These two major political groups, in this case, they're Christian and Muslim. They fight for power. There's divisions. And what makes it unique? Identity politics. I'm Muslim, therefore I vote this way. I'm Christian, therefore I vote that way. Therefore I hate my neighbor who is of the other side. Same with Northern Ireland, right? We see different Christian groups fighting each other. So when you teach people that others are the oppressors, not fellow citizens, that anger becomes righteous and violence becomes justified, even celebrated. Anybody remember the recent celebration of the assassination, is what they were calling it, of the United Healthcare CEO? Guy's walking down the street and gets taken out by some kid. And we got people cheering for this, right? Ask yourself, like, at what point did we start celebrating cold-blooded murder? And this was of a CEO. This wasn't even a political, quote unquote, action. This is what identity politics does at its worst. It doesn't build bridges, it justifies bricks through windows or worse. So, how did we get here? How did a nation built on unity, a melting pot of the world, right, become a nation that is divided, right? And you remember we talked about in episode 6 a couple of weeks ago the social breakdown and how you had to worry about your neighbor more than you did the government. Um, this shows some of the reasons why. So let's take a deeper look at this. Let's go back a little bit and look at how we became divided. And I will submit to you that it was not by accident, right? You can't take down a country like the United States that's unified. Like there's nobody that could have taken us down in the 80s. Unified, strong economy, strong moral background, strong families, stronger families anyway. Right? Political parties weren't on the extremes. So let's take a look at it real quick. Early roots, 1960s activism. We have some civil rights stuff. We got feminism going on. People are like, yeah, we've got a cause, right? Then we shift from equality under the law to group-based grievances. Now, this is as we started in the 80s and 90s. We also see that this is starting to be taught in academic institutions. Now, most recently, this is critical race theory and those kinds of things. So we're starting to teach people, hey, you were wronged. Remember the political correctness and how political correctness opened up the door to be offended? And it was okay to be offended because you've been wronged, right? What else was introduced? Fox News, CNN. We got a new coin that's introduced, and it's basically a wooden nickel of truth. Fox News on one side, CNN on the other, both of whom reinforce outrage and injustice. Remember what I said about not being able to watch the news without getting angry? That's a really tough thing to do. But why is the news that way? It didn't used to be. Back in the days of CBS News with Dan Rather and NBC Evening News and these guys, they were telling the news. They weren't selling outrage. But with Fox News and CNN, there's a constant narrative. The narrative is this: you are oppressed and the other side is to blame. Look at these injustices, and it's a never-ending parade of injustices. Someone knocking over a political sign in someone's yard. Someone being kicked out of school for wearing a Trump shirt. Someone being slapped because they're gay. Right? So this manufactured emotionalism overrides basically the nuances of life and instead tries to paint everything in a black and white, like hatred, one for the other. One's wrong and the other's right. There's no nuances. There's no, hey, this is my neighbor and he, feels this way and it's okay. Um, so that's where we start to see this. Was CNN and Fox News established for this purpose? I tend to think there was a little bit of that. And next episode, we're going to talk about the media and Hollywood, by the way. And we'll get a little bit into this. But even if it's not on purpose, we know that that's how it's been used. So, do you really want to be used by one of these? Do you really want to be the guy or the gal that's sitting there watching TV and you are adopting hate for people you don't know, for causes you don't understand, by a news organization who you don't know why they're doing it? Do you really want to be that person? Like, think twice. Think twice before you adopt hate for anybody or any group. So therein lies the rub, right? There's a power benefit here. We've got a divide and conquer type situation. We've got a fragmented public. A fragmented public is easier to control. We've got elite usage, right? The Waltons, billionaires, institutions that fund identity-based causes. Now, a lot of these same elites, they themselves want benefits of you know an economy, right? But they want to avoid scrutiny of themselves. They want to redefine justice on their terms, and they want to redirect anger away from the power and toward fellow citizens. Think about that. They don't want you angry at the government. They want you angry at each other. And the they, in this case, if you're like, oh, this sounds like a conspiracy, go read the New York Times. Full page ad by the Waltons. I'm not the one who put it there. It's a full page ad. Go read it. Go read it. And there's a good article in Forbes as well. There's nothing conspiratorial about it. This is people exercising their rights to manipulate, right? But let's talk about institutional adoption for a minute. Universities, the curriculum is now framed around identity and grievance, right? Corporate America, you got to have DEI offices. They're more concerned with image than than equality. Like, hey, we need 4 black guys and 3 Spanish and 2 Asians. And, I mean, come on. NGOs and think tanks are promoting identity first policies globally. So think about that for a second. If you can divide a nation by identity, you don't need to conquer it. It will tear itself apart. Just saying. Just saying. All right. Can I bring up Martin Luther King for a minute? What was the core premise of his remarks? Right? I have a dream. Now remember, this is something that, and again, I'm going to use the Democrat Party because they're the ones who bought and paid for these riots and most all of the recent riots that we've had over the last 8 years. What was the core premise? All individuals are equal and should be judged by character, not group identity. That was what Martin Luther King says. I have a dream that we're not judged by the color of our skin, but by the strength of our character. What's the core promise of identity, or the core premise, I should say, of identity politics? People are identified by group, race, gender, sexuality, and the systems of oppression unique to that group, right? What's the primary goal of Martin Luther King? He wanted legal and civic equality, regardless of identity. He wanted removal of discriminatory laws and practices. But that's not what we get in identity politics. We get recognition and redress of group-based grievances. And this is often through preferential policies or cultural power. We heard the mayor of Chicago saying that, oh, yeah, well, when I got into office, we hired all black people. Right? Because we're going to make things right. What was the means of change from Martin Luther King? He was into peaceful protests, moral appeal, and constitutional reform. His emphasis was on nonviolence and unity. Contrast that with what we saw in the King's riots. There's cultural revolution, activism in media, academia, other institutions. There's an emphasis on narrative, power, and fighting. Totally different, right? And at the end of the day, we have an opportunity here to look at these stark differences because we've got people that are invoking Martin Luther King's name all the time. All the time. And it's the same people that are also promoting DEI. And they're also promoting society as a hierarchy of oppressors and the oppressed. Right? Justice requires dismantling existing power structures. In other words, they're literally talking about the dismantling of, they've mentioned it, of our Constitution. And they are out there then talking about how do we avoid kings? We don't want kings. Martin Luther King viewed things differently. He said, society is imperfect, but it's redeemable. This is a guy who really was oppressed. Justice comes from fulfilling its founding ideals, is what he said. So what is the role of race and gender according to Martin Luther King? He said it's important, but it's not the definitive side of this. All people deserve the same rights and respect under the law, right? Just like we don't want organizations hiring people based on the color of their skin. He was saying everybody needs to have the same rights under the law and the same respect. We don't see that. We see a disrespect of men. We see a disrespect of white men. We see a disrespect of each of the parties. We see people disrespecting people of various sexual orientations and these kind of things. Why? We're disrespecting our fellow citizens. For what? Well, this is central to identity politics, right? We have to have systemic and historical victimhood. So, I could talk more of that, but bottom line is that where Martin Luther King saw a colorblind constitution, identity politics seeks a color-defined culture. One believes in rising together, the other often sees progress as zero sum. What do you believe? What is your belief on identity politics? Can a city divided stand, or will it fall? Can a people divided against itself stand, or will they fall? And that's why I postulated a couple of weeks ago that we were maybe already beaten and need to rethink our ways. So I'm, you know, both when I talked about globalism and I talked about the Bush family, we talked about some of the incidents that each of the presidents had under their tenure. We talked about these global power structures. Uh, Something that's meaningful that through all of this is there's various influencers out there. Well, we saw it with the Walton family, right? Um, we see that they are spending money on a full page ad. And with that full page ad, and again, this is 76-year-old Christy Walton. She has made herself the leader of the No Kings movement. She's spending her money. By the way, I'm not faulting her. I'm just saying we have people that are upset and they were just marching a couple of months back when Elon Musk was involved. But where is the ire for Miss Christy Walton, right? I think she's worth like $3.6 billion or some crazy number like that. And why isn't she being talked at by that side? Okay. So I hope that that we can see here that there's a little bit of um, cognitive dissonance that we need to address, and we need to look at it and whether we are actually part of the problem or whether we're going to influence things in a good way. So when we talk about these power structures and we talk about the things that are going on, I want to pivot for a minute to some of these power structures, what's out there, and why we are dealing with this on a bigger level. Because the Walton family, the folks in, well, even Elon Musk, but the folks in NGOs or other things that we've talked about, globalist organizations, they're not alone. And it's important that we look at what these folks are doing and why. So I'm going to go through and just read a few of um, the some of the organizations that are out there. We're gonna dive into some of them and think about it. Some of these have very positive things that they do, right? Let's take a look. So an NGO is a non-governmental organization. These are independent, they're nonprofit most of the time. They exert influence via advocacy or funding or operational capacity. So let's list a few categories here. We've got humanitarian and development organizations. This includes the Red Cross, the International Committee for the Red Cross. Everybody likes the Red Cross, right? We've got CARE International, World Vision, Save the Children, Oxfam International, Catholic Relief Services, the Carter Center, as in Jimmy Carter, and the Mercy Corps. When you listen to those for humanitarian and development, and the other one I didn't include in there was Doctors Without Borders. right? We've we generally we got a pretty favorable, positive view of those, I think. Not to speak on your behalf, but uh, definitely a positive view. But I want to ask you a question. Do you know what these groups do? Have you looked at what they do? Have you looked at the effects? Remember when Barack Obama was put before us by the Democrat Party, and when he was put before us, what was his big claim to fame? Do you remember what he did in Hyde Park, Chicago? And I've been there, driven through there many times. He was called a community organizer. Remember, this guy had never even so much as run a Boy Scout troop, but we were told he was a community organizer. Have you ever been through there and tried to find the community he organized? How he made it so much better? I'm telling you, go to Hyde Park and look for that community. Look for anyone who remembers anything he ever did there. I challenge you, right? But this is why you yourself need to know and understand what these groups do. So we've got environmental groups, Greenpeace, right? These are the ones that are trying to sink ships that are out there whale hunting and stuff. Worldwide Fund for Nature, Friends of the Earth International, the Nature Conservancy, and Rainforest Alliance. Again, everybody wants a nice earth around them. What about human rights groups like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Transparency International, Freedom House, the International Crisis Group? Again, do you know any of these organizations, right? Do you know that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it operates like a large NGO, but it's a foundation. So just to bring that clarity, it's part of the health and medicine super group of NGOs. There's a vaccine alliance called Gavi. There's a global fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. So there's a bunch of these out there, and right, we all. I think one of the questions I want to bring up is, why do we need these organizations if we have solid government? Is it because these are out there for the places that have weak government and no taxes and aren't handling it themselves? Is that what it's for? I mean, just think about the mandate there and where that mandate lies, and do your own research, right? Do your own research. Let's talk about what I'm going to call supranational organizations. These are supranational and multilateral organizations. Supranational means they're above the nations, right? You've got the United Nations, and that includes the World Health Organization, UNICEF, which is for children, the UNHCR, which is refugees. You got UNDP, which is development. You got things like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank Group, the World Trade Organization, WTO, and the International Criminal Court, ICC, which just indicted a couple of the guys, the former presidents of the Philippines. They were taken in handcuffs and thrown on a plane and shipped off to Europe for trial. So we're starting to see, hey, these aren't just NGOs. These are places that have the authority to move people, to move money on behalf of the world. Did you vote for that? Is my question. Did you vote for your tax dollars to go there? What about think tanks? The World Economic Forum, that's otherwise known as Davos. Council on Foreign Relations, we mentioned that a little bit last time. Chatham House, which is the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and they have some pretty good debates over there, you can see. The Brookings Institution, and one of these times we're going to get into some of the Brookings Institution. One of my favorite documents was released by the Brookings Institution. What about the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome? Have you heard of the Club of Rome? I highly recommend you look it up. George Soros has one called the Open Society Foundations. So George Soros is another one that funds a lot of these extracurricular activities, otherwise known as riots, on the Democrat side. And wouldn't it be nice to know what the Open Society Foundation is? And these are non-governmental. They're often elite-driven groups that influence policy behind the scenes. Well, what policy are they influencing? What about the Atlantic Council? What's that? The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And last time we talked about the Bilderberg Group, right? We went into the Bilderberg Group in depth last episode. And now with these private foundations, right? These are not NGOs, but they fund and shape global initiatives like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Ford, right? Henry Ford, Rockefellers, the Wellcome Trust. But what about some of the things we don't normally think of? Like, what about the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, right? We're ISO 9001 certified, ISO 27,000 or 18,000 or 14,000. What about the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, International Telecommunication Union, World Health Assembly, and ICANN? They control the internet domain name system. Remember, the ICANN started in the United States. Under Barack Obama, he's like, no, that needs to be in the globe. It shouldn't be something that the United States controls and makes money off of. We should put it into some nameless control on the globalist side. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know I took a while, like 7 or 8 minutes, to just list all of these off. For heaven's sake, do some research. Because if you're going to get an opinion from somebody like Fox News or CNN, I feel sorry for you. You can use Fox News and CNN to help shape opinion, but you're going to have to keep yourself emotionally, I would say, aloof from those organizations. You're going to have to not drink the Kool-Aid while you're going through this, because you're out there taking action, and that's exactly what these riots were and what these march were and these quote-unquote protests. You're going to go out there and take action, and you don't even know the whole story, right? I want to get into some of these financial institutions. I want to point something out here. You may think off of that list that we put together, you may think, oh, well, those are all good, and they all. I'm sure they are. Well, you're not sure they are. You're just guessing because you're maybe too lazy to actually do the research, and that's okay, right? Not everybody has time to dig into that, but don't go running around acting like somehow if it's endorsed by the Democrat Party or if it's endorsed by the Republican Party, that it's okay for you to endorse it too. You don't have that luxury, right? Because you're about to go out and hate your neighbor because of something that you're assuming. All right. Let's talk about the Bank for International Settlements. Have you heard of the Bank of International Settlements? Settlements is what I'm saying, by the way. The BIS. Founded in 1930, based in Basel, Switzerland. It's owned by 63 central banks. It represents 95% of the global GDP. 95%. It is the central bank for the central banks. And it is a forum for international monetary and financial cooperation. It has a very secretive policy coordination, especially among the G10. And it sets key global financial norms via its committees. In other words, the Basel Committee. Do you ever see a report from that group? No, you don't. You won't see too many reports from them. There's a couple of groups that work alongside the BIS, and they serve similar system-level roles. We've mentioned a couple of them, like the International Monetary Fund. Now, the International Monetary Fund offers emergency loans to countries. It dictates structural adjustments and economic policies. The keyword dictates. No kings there, right? In dictating policy. Seen as highly influential over national economies. That's the International Monetary Fund. What about the World Bank Group? It's focused on global development and infrastructure loans. And it is also attached to the Bretton Woods system, which is why when we talked at the very beginning about the Bretton Woods, very first episode, we talked about how the United States was handed the baton and said, you're going to lead this world for a while. As that baton is questioned now in global spheres, what will you do? Which quote unquote sides will you be on if you have no idea what's going on? What about the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision? So this is another one that's kind of it's also operating in this sphere, kind of a support structure. It's technically under the BIS, but it's crucial. It sets the Basel capital requirements, 1 through 4 capital requirements, and it sets the global banking rules, but it has no formal authority. But it is the de facto law for financial institutions. Financial institutions can't just go do what they want. So the Basel Committee sets those policies. Who's on the Basel Committee? Do you know? I don't think many people know. What about the Financial Stability Board, the FSB? That oversees the stability of global financial system. It was created by the G20, and now it's hosted by the BIS. And it coordinates national financial authorities and standard-setting bodies. We also have the International Organization of Securities Commissions, which sets global standards for stock markets. And we have the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, the IAIS, sets international standards for insurance. But there's a couple of other, and you probably, if you've ever sent a SWIFT payment to someone overseas, there's a SWIFT organization that manages messaging systems, and it includes interbank communications. There's a lot of these types of organizations. So why am I diving into this? And I apologize if this is boring material. But sometimes we need to get into this because we have 1,800 people out there marching on the street, 1,800 people, 1,800 cities where people are marching on the streets. And none of them know this. I'm guessing there may be one or two, right? But they're not out there, protesting the BIS. Let's put it that way. So the BIS, again, was founded in 1930. It was founded to settle World War. Look at this founding purpose. Founded to settle World War I reparations. World War I. And it became the central bank for all of the other banks. Okay. So let's talk about why this is important, right? We've got, and these groups are often, it's not just Americans that are accusing them of eroding sovereignty. They dictate financial policy, right? And this includes the IMF austerity measures that we saw in Greece. This is Basel capital rules. They create supranational norms without democratic accountability, and they operate in secrecy. Did you know that the BIS has legal immunity from any national law? United States can't sue it. Russia, Germany, Ukraine, Norway. There's no way anybody can sue the BIS. The BIS has the authority to take whatever money it wants from whoever it wants, and it doesn't have to give a reason why, and it can hold it. And it can do whatever it wants with it under its policy. Did you know that? Do we know what they're funding is my question. But, supporters say, hey, it's global finance. It needs coordination to prevent crises. And these guys give us expertise. They give us, things that we don't have local people that can do that. We need somebody that can see the whole picture internationally. And they also promote rules that give us consistency and transparency, although I really question the transparency part if we have no idea what they're doing. But the critics argue, hey, these institutions form a portion of the shadow government, and finances are a big deal. BIS, IMF, FSB, their decisions affect billions of people. And I'm going to underline this next part, without consent. Did you consent to the BIS affecting your economy? Where is your No King's March? Oh, wait a minute. The No King's March against the BIS wasn't paid for by an oligarch who supports your political party that you have been following because of identity politics. So therefore, you're not out there like a little puppet. And I'm sorry to say that so bluntly, but if you are going to be like a little something marching to a Pied Piper's flute, you need to know who the Pied Piper works for, and you need to understand what's going on. Or at least be somewhat astute as to be able to march against all of these, kings, the Bidens, the Obamas, the Bushes, BIS, etc., etc. So they prioritize banking and corporate interests over citizen welfare. They have to. Like, you cannot stop the cogs of the global machine. The global machine can't afford it, right? So, I, like I said in the previous episode, we talked about global power structures, and that was pretty mellow. Since then, we've had a lot of these marches and so-called righteous indignation that people saw and gained from the news. And then some people were paid and they were out there marching. So bottom line is, this is not organic. This is not organic at all. And when you know that, when you see that, it's time to take a look at what you're doing and why. So what is organic? And did you see any news articles about the marches they tried to have, but nobody showed up? There's a lot of people who don't care and who don't believe the way that the rioters and the marchers believed, and who see a much different picture. And that's important. That's important. So how do we move beyond this? How do we get to a different place? And what is that different place? Right? What exactly is that different place, and how do we get there? And when you take a minute and look at that and ponder that, let me just ask you, are we headed to a better place now? Will the fighting get us there? Like, when people are out there marching, are they imagining that Trump is going to come out of the White House, lay down his proverbial crown? Okay, everybody, you got me. Thanks for convincing me of my ways. I should have never enforced the law. I should have, even though I was elected by a landslide to do this, I should just, put down my scepter and go home. Is that what you're imagining? Like, seriously. Like, because I don't see that happening. I don't think anybody sees that happening. All right. So where do we go from here? what is it that we need to do? I've talked a lot about it. I've talked about all of the things that are affecting the way you believe, the way you act, the way you um, all of your thoughts before, whether you are actually um, a critical thinker, or whether you're somebody that's just out there slurping up the Kool-Aid at a Jim Jones conference, waiting to pass out, right? Um, how do we move forward? What do we do? What are the things we can do as a group, as a society, and how do we bring it? Um, I want to highlight maybe something that you can do, right? The first thing is to be aware of all of these power structures and to understand that some of them are good, some of them are bad, and I'm using generic terms here. Some of them serve a purpose, some of them don't. Um, some of them are manipulated and do manipulate others. Some are very have a good cause associated with them. Um, and some were put there on purpose to change things. And do you know the difference? And how would we judge them? How would we put them on a scale and say, yes, this one's good and this one's not? You know, where does that come from? Like I asked for last time or in episode 6, where I talked about social breakdown, I asked you which organizations are promoting the positivity, the togetherness, the unity in our society. Who's doing that? So we've talked tonight about billionaires stirring division from behind their own curtains, right? And now some of them are walking out. We saw Elon Musk do it under Biden. He walked out, carried a kitchen sink or a toilet or something into Twitter, right? He's stepping out rather boldly. We see the Walton family stepping out, taking out ads and publicly talking about it. We talked about global organizations shaping policies that none of us voted for. We've talked about identity politics ripping neighbors and families apart. But we are not powerless. No, we are not powerless. In every single era of confusion, there are people who see clearly and who speak with courage. And you don't need a million followers to influence the world. You need truth, right? You need a heart that accepts truth. And truth is the most important thing to you. You need conviction. And you need to be able to convey that in a kind and loving way to others. And you need peace in your home. Start there. Start there. If you've got truth, if you've got conviction, and you have peace, that means you're doing the right things, right? Start there. Get to know your neighbors. Embrace the other side. If you are a Republican, go hug a Democrat. If you're a Democrat, go hug a Republican. And maybe a few communists. Go hug them. Get to know them. Talk with them. Enjoy a meal with them. Invite them for a barbecue. You know how I ended up on this program? Sam invited me to talk about a group that I was a part of called the Deep Thinkers. Represented many nations, political views, and it may surprise you to know that there aren't Democrats and Republicans over in Britain or Denmark. So yes, you can think differently. It's okay. But I really enjoyed those groups because those groups gave us the opportunity to really, I would say, get into the deeper issues and see each other for the humanity that's there. There's a couple of practical ways that I think we can move forward. The first and foremost is to think critically, and that was one of my goals tonight. Please avoid consuming media without question. You do need to question it, all of it, especially the sources you like. You need to question how it makes you feel. You need to trace the sources, and you need to speak out against your own organizations when they do not live up to the standards that should be there. I think that's one of the biggest problems I have with media. And again, we're going to get into this next time, is that what used to be standards of journalism, like journalistic integrity, has gone by the way in many organizations. So you have a duty to think critically. And when you think critically, set up a structure for thinking critically with friends and family. One of the things that I used to do with my boys that I think we still do, and we're all different in our political persuasion. One of the things we used to do is talk about politics and social issues and things every night at the dinner table. For a while, it got banned because we would get into these discussions that would get sometimes heated. But in this world of noise, there's some things you can do to think critically. First, ask who benefits. When someone is pushing a message, follow the money, follow the power. Right? We see people that did that with Musk. Oh, he's getting contracts. Oh, he's doing this. Is it really about justice or is it about control? Does someone, anyone, gain profit or votes or influence from your outrage? Just ask the question, who benefits? And that leads us to the next point. If you are outraged, separate emotion from evidence. Just because something makes you feel angry doesn't mean it's true. I'm going to say that again. Just because something makes you feel angry doesn't mean it's true. You need to ask, what are the facts? Right? If you removed the music, the editing, or the social media spin, what's really there? Right? Have you ever just, and I challenge you to do this, turn off the volume while you're watching the news and watch the news anchors' faces. And you see what they're trying to convey in emotions. See what the headlines say. And you'll see right there, it's what it's telling you to believe. So again, ask who benefits, separate emotion from evidence. And the third one is extremely important. Beware of forced binaries. In other words, they want you to believe it's either A or B. Whenever you're told it's only option A or only option B, there's often, and 110% of the time, a hidden option C. There's a whole other story to it. Left versus right, black versus white, pro versus anti. These are tools to divide. You need to ask, is there more to the story? What are the other viewpoints? What are the nuances? And why aren't they being publicized? Actually, you don't even need to ask why. You just need to ask what. What are they? The fourth thing is to demand sources, then check them. Don't just quote the quote. Read the context. Right? Screenshots and viral headlines, they often lie to you by the omissions that are there, or that aren't there, rather, I should say. Dig into full documents, speeches, laws, data, whatever it is that you are claiming to represent. Dig into it. I have a niece that recently challenged me on Facebook to that post I was talking about. She makes several interesting claims, and it's interesting. And when I applaud her for going deeper, one of the things I noticed is that she's at least making an attempt to go below the surface. Now, obviously, I have still an opposing view because I would think that my um, my views that I've gone much deeper. But do you see the forced dichotomy there? Like, are we really forced to say, oh, she's wrong and I'm wrong and she's right, right? Can't we just discuss it and say, here's some of the issues we see, here's some of the things, and we can come together to understand, ooh, crap, we're in a horrific spot because we've had a whole bunch of kings for the last 25 years. So again, demand your sources, dig into them, dig into all the data, do your own research, and don't rely just on ChatGPT. The fifth one is watch for repetition. The louder and more often something is said, the more it needs to be questioned. And you've all seen those videos. I would have loved to have been able to tee one up tonight where literally the news media is the news stations are repeating the exact same words. Where are they getting the words from? That's the question. Watch for the repetition. That's propaganda, and it relies on repetition. Propaganda relies on repetition. Remember that. Propaganda relies on repetition. Truth doesn't panic, it just patiently waits to be heard. So watch for the repetition and then look for what's out there that's true. You also need to know when to say, I don't know. Um, there's a saying that says, certainty without humility is the enemy of truth. So doubt is not a weakness, it's the doorway to wisdom. Teach yourself. And your listeners, if you remember, all of us have listeners. You may not be on a radio program, but you have people that you talk to. You're getting your hair done, whatever. Teach yourself and your listeners to sit with questions and keep learning. Well, I don't know how Kamala Harris got selected. Well, I have my suspicions. Oh, really? What are they? Oh, well, Biden did it because he was upset at Barack Obama and he wanted to stick a poke, wanted to poke him in the eye. So he picked her and went out and said he's going to endorse her, and the Democrat elites couldn't do anything about it, and they're upset. Well, why do you think that? Oh, because I have a recording of Hillary Rodham Clinton talking about it, and also Nancy Pelosi, and also Barack Obama saying that it wasn't the way it was supposed to end up. These are the people that were trying to select somebody. Oh, great. That's why you think that. Well, I haven't heard that data. Can you send it to me? Yeah, here's the recording. Listen to it all for yourself in context, right? So, but know when to say you don't know. Teach yourself, teach your listeners to sit with those questions and keep learning, right? And then the last one I think is really important. You want to compare claims across time. So history is really the ultimate fact checker, right? Um, what happened the last time a politician or group said something similar? I find it quite interesting when Bernie Sanders is talking about no kings. When he is on a podcast uh, talking about how Barack Obama removed him or effectively eliminated him from the primaries, when Barack Obama had nothing. Why was Barack Obama involved at all? Why does Barack Obama have a staff? Why does he have people in the White House during the Biden administration? Why does Hillary Clinton have people in the White House? Can you answer me that? So again, look at the claims across time of these politicians. Does it make sense? So that is the first thing. You got to think critically, follow those 7 steps. I promise you they'll work well for you, right? What about speaking peacefully? Truth doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to hate. It does need to stand firm. It's best spoken with love, right? One of the things that I absolutely enjoyed about my niece's interaction with me on Facebook when we were talking about the Kings thing is she did it with such love, right? She basically said, "Hey, it's your favorite niece." And I was like, "How did you know you're my favorite niece? You're not supposed to know that. That's not supposed to get out because the other nieces would be upset." But but think about it, right? She could have come on there just like anybody. But here's what she said. "Hey, favorite niece here," and she had a little hand waving, or at least in the top 40, and she had a little winky face. "Happy Father's Day," and a heart. And she said, "One thing I've always loved about you is how deeply you care about this country, and you don't just take and how you don't just take information at face value. That's something I genuinely respect and try to live by too." Isn't that nice? Isn't that a nice opening? It was right after that she smacked me a few times. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, think about it. Do you have to respond with hate and ire? What if you responded with compassion? This is for people you don't even know. You're on Facebook, you know, jerky guy 318 responds to you with a hateful comment, and you respond back, "Hey, jerky guy 318, that's a wonderful comment. I see your point there, and I've often questioned myself. Why does Trump have to be so rude when he's talking to people? I agree. He shouldn't have to do that if he's doing things in a way that's for all people to benefit, and we want to bring peace to the world. Having said that, let's talk about the policies that he's actually doing and how effective they are. Do you see that? Do you see how different that is than rather saying, "Hey, jerky guy 318, you're ugly, your mama's this, your dog is that," right? I mean, why? Right? So speak peacefully. The truth doesn't need to shout, it doesn't need hate. You can still stand firm, right? Another one, build strong families and communities. Build strong families and communities. What does that mean? Well, you heard me talk about it in Social Breakdown, episode 6. If you need to go back and listen to that. Um, but what is your community made of, right? If you want to resist chaos, start with order in your own home. Why does this matter? Because families are the first line of defense against nonsense, and they are the basis, the core, the building block, the little brick that makes up culture. So when families are strong, societies don't fall apart so easily. And communities are the immune system. When the national body figuratively gets sick, it's the communities that keep things alive and functioning. Let's go back to countries like Russia during World War II, right? One of the reasons they weren't defeated is because the other countries, when you think about the Nazis invading, the other countries had just put up a line of defense. When the Nazis broke through, the German army broke through. Well, okay, well they broke through there. There were 50 guys there at that one little point, and now it's all lost. The whole country's gone. That's not what the Russians did. As the front lines kept moving deeper into Russian territory, all of the people gathered and fought, and they were outgunned for sure, right? So think about what goes on in places like Cuba. They have gardens. That's what's kept them alive, right? So communities are the immune system. We stick together. Yet I hear a lot of people say this, like, hey man, if stuff hits the fan, I'm gonna hunker down with some guns and some food, and my neighbor comes over, I'm gonna shoot him dead on my porch. Really? Like that's how you want to play it, right? Um, think about it. Think about the community. Wouldn't you love it for your whole community to be so close and kind to each other that nobody would have to do anything like that? Anyway, um, this is where power returns to the people, not through mobs, not through marches, but through households, taking cookies next door, right? So here's some practical steps to do that. One, eat at the table. Sounds small. It's not. Remember I said that all of these conversations I had with my boys, we had at the dinner table. That's where culture is passed down. We passed down a culture of talking to each other. Have you noticed one thing that I definitely I would say is a horrible thing that the Democrat Party is promoting and the liberals are promoting? Last year at Thanksgiving, they're like, it's okay to stay away from family. It's okay to hate them because of the way they voted. Really? Do you see the division there? Do you see the all-inclusive DEI people that talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion being hateful, spiteful, mean, rude, divisive? I do. The dinner table is where culture is passed down, where stories are told, and where peace is practiced. People learn how to talk there. One of the reasons I started Deep Thinkers is because I found that people in the community didn't know how to have a conversation about politics, religion, science, all of the things that are affecting them. And I was about to say politics a second time. Maybe it's true. When you talk about these things, when they affect you every day and you can't even talk to your neighbor without being hated, right? Again, people kicking down the neighbor's sign. So teach your children, and again, so when you eat at the table, you want to talk about truth, even when it's hard. You want to teach your children and your neighbors to love truth, not trends. Love the truth, not the trends. And you want to have conversations that challenge lies, but always do it with grace. And you want to show up for each other. Bring meals, watch each other's kids, fix a fence, help during a crisis, right? Go out and meet your neighbor. These small acts build real local power, the kind that can't be regulated or removed or censored by large corporations or oligarchs or political parties, right? Unplug, unplug, and reconnect. Don't let your living room be run by cable news or TikTok or whatever. Make eye contact when you're in public. Turn off devices for real talk. Build bonds that resist digital distortion. And my wife would say, hug people. She is a hugger. Again, start local first. Build trust with neighbors before worrying about Washington. A good neighbor is more powerful than a distant politician. Can I say that again? A good neighbor is more powerful than a distant politician. A nation is just a collection of families. When the family collapses, the republic follows. But when the family is strong, freedom lives on. Okay? Remember that. So I talked about practical ways forward. I talked about thinking critically, speaking peacefully, building strong families and communities. And I would say the last thing that I can go through here is live it with integrity. Be the kind of person that no politician or power can buy. Not even with an Obama phone, right? What is integrity? Right? It's being true to your values and they're not for sale. Right? You see these shows where people offer money for somebody to go do something outrageous, and always in the shows they go do it. Where's the integrity? If your values aren't for sale, your soul cannot be manipulated. In a world where everyone is trading truth for popularity or likes or power, integrity is rebellion. It really is. It really is rebellion. And that's something you need to be aware of. Why does integrity matter? It's freedom from control. If your values aren't for sale, your soul can't be manipulated, right? You can't fix Washington overnight, but you can live in such a way that your kids, your neighbors, and everybody will trust you. And if you're a Christian, that means a lot. If you're not a Christian and you believe in humanism and all that, that means a lot, right? So how to live with integrity? Again, speak the truth, refuse the bribe, keep your promises, and clean your own house first. You know, powerful people fear one thing the most, and it's a person they can't control. Live that way. Be that way. Become part of the remnant that holds this world together, right? All righty, ladies and gentlemen, it has been an absolute pleasure. And in wrapping up this episode, I want to let you know that there's there's some important things that I think that we can look forward to in the bright future for America, right? I think we have their best days ahead. But the battle for our country is not just political, it is moral. It's quote unquote spiritual. And for those of you that think I'm talking about religion, I'm not. Talking about the things that bring us together, that bind us together, right? It starts with you, what you believe. I've said it in multiple episodes. I've said, hey, you have a choice in what you believe. You have a choice. You are the one who selects all of the news sources you listen to. You are the one who decides what to act on. So it starts with you, with what you believe, with how you love, with what you're willing to stand for, even when it costs something. So join me next time. We're going to talk about the media in Hollywood, and we've got a few more episodes planned. I'll be on again tomorrow night. We're also going to go over generational fluctuations. This one's going to be interesting because it's going to be talking about how the generations can be lined up, and there's some certain patterns in the generations. What else? We're going to talk about truth and moral government. And we are going to talk about, we're going to do a complete mesh of everything I've talked about. We're going to go over all of it. That might be a longer episode. We're going to go over everything. We're going to show how it all lines up on one big massive timeline so that you can get a clearer picture. And then finally, we are going to talk about your part in all of it. Very similar to what we did tonight. And when we do that, we'll find that things are different than we first thought. The world is a different place. So if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, put down your ideological blinders and open up your mind. And when you do, you will see things in a different way. You will understand things in a different way. Your relationships will change. Ladies and gentlemen, it's nice to have knowledge, but it's better to have understanding. And on a clear day, you can see for miles. But on a clear mind, you can see forever. So thank you again. And thank you, Sam, for allowing me to come here tonight. I will see you all next time. And I look forward to going into these topics more deeply. So until next time, thank you, and we will see you later. Matthew Von Trapp signing off.